Alright, and we're back. So, hey y'all, this is a new game I played today. Yeah, this, as you can see by the title, had a lot of very interesting tactical ideas. So, let's get into it. So, I start off the game with the move d4, which is a very reasonable move, obviously. Very simple. My opponent plays knight f6, one of the main moves, either d5 or knight f6. I play the Trzymkowski, my main line. e6, e4, bishop e7. I'm gonna go through the opening real quick until I'll tell you when I'm out of like prep. I play e5, knight d5, it takes, and here's when I start thinking on my own, and I immediately make a mistake. As you can tell, I immediately make a mistake, and I play the move c4, which is just a bad move. Apparently, the better idea here, the better way to play is to go for knight c3 and actually block your c pawn, because it's not that important to bring the c pawn up in this circumstance. It's more better to go for some line with f4 instead and try to pound on the king side instead of the queen side, which is very interesting. I should have realized that, but instead I play c4, which is just kind of my normal plan. d5, very reasonable. As some of you might know, en passant is forced, but I would have lost here if it was, because I did not go en passant, and instead, the reason why I don't go en passant here, by the way, is because after en passant, you can easily develop the queen or the c pawn. It actually doesn't matter which. I think they're both good. I guess the c pawn is slightly better because then the queen is activated to a5. I don't really have as much central control as I wanted. I don't have my pawn on e5 anymore, and it's not actually better for white at all, so I didn't really want to go for that, obviously, and I just go knight c3, castles, knight f3, and my opponent plays the move a6, already a mistake. You know, I see this a lot at my level, where people just play random like a6 and h6 or h3 a3 for no reason. My bad, I had to sneeze there. Yeah, the a6 and h6 like randomly, where it doesn't really make sense. I'm not gonna put a bishop or a knight here, and if the idea is b5, that's a stupid idea. Like no offense, that's like a really dumb idea. I don't know why you would go for that. So whenever like a6 or h6 appears, I'm normally kind of like confused, but either way, he goes a6. And b5 is even impossible right now because I will just take, but his idea is obviously dc first. So I play dc myself, and the idea is actually here, the best move in this position is bishop d3, and that was kind of the idea of dc. The idea of dc was after takes, it doesn't really matter which way you take with, then I'm able to go bishop d3, and I thought that if I went bishop d3 immediately, he could take. But I totally forgot that the Greek gift exists here, and I'm able to just win the game right now with something like this, and a checkmate is basically unstoppable, or he's gonna like lose his queen or something. So I really should have found this. I was very alert about the Greek gift later in the game, but in this position I guess it just wasn't. So that's why bishop d3 is better, but I thought dc, and then I'd have to move my bishop again. So I played dc first and bishop d3 now. And now I'm always aware about the Greek gift. It doesn't work right now because, of course, with the Greek gift, you have to remember that even though the knight can come to g5, the queen can come to h5, and the bishop is here, the knight can't come to g5 actually. So you always have to remember that. Always have to remember all the prerequisites for a Greek gift before you play it. And yeah, I'm always looking out for that, and it almost works a lot of times in this game. So after the move knight c6, I go for something very simple. I go for the move, I just go for a3. I'm always looking for Greek gifts, but it doesn't really work right now, so I just play a3, and I disallow the knight coming to b4, which I thought was his whole idea, because I don't see what the knight is doing besides this. Like, it can go to a5, but I don't really see the point. The idea is mostly just to develop a knight and start targeting my pawns in the center, but I guess I'm just not smart enough to see that yet. So whatever. My opponent goes knight f4. I go castles, and I say, okay, I think it'd be fine if you can take my bishop. You can take my bishop, and then I'll just transform my advantage into a little bit of an attack. I'm able to bring my pieces over to the side of the board pretty quickly. I'm able to maybe rook lift in some lines here, so I didn't think that I would be that bad off if my opponent took my bishop, and fortunately they did not. They played the move b5, which is another big mistake, and it actually almost loses to the move bishop e4, which targets the knight and the rook. And I have to say I should have played that move. I have to say I should have played that move, and I looked at it. I know I looked at it. I must have seen it. I had seen it, but it's crazy. It's crazy that I didn't find that move. And the reason why I didn't find it is because after this, I didn't really see what I was doing. I was putting some pressure, but at any point you'd be able to play knight a5, and he might even have some discovered attacks on my bishop. So I don't know why I didn't play that. I played bishop c2 instead, which is decent. It's not a bad move or anything, but it's not as good as bishop e4, and I should have absolutely found that. Little bit of punching myself in the face there, but bishop b7, reasonable. And I play the move rook c1 because I don't really know what else to do. Computer wants queen d2, which makes a lot of sense. You kick the knight out of the square, and then after the knight goes back here, I have actually a pretty decent game because I just have more central control and more development than my opponent. And for something like maybe rook e1, rook fe1, I should be fine in this position like forever. So I should have played that. Instead I went rook c1, which is not a bad move. Primarily it develops the rook along this semi-open file. It's semi-open because pieces don't really count as closing a file. It doesn't really ever count as closing a file, so it's not really closed ever, even though there are 3 pieces on it. And my opponent has a pawn here, so that means that it's only semi-open and not fully open. A little bit of technical jargon for you there, but that's kind of the gist of it. So I thought this was a reasonable move. My opponent goes for the move f6, of course, trying to open up the center. But I thought in this position, and I thought, okay, my opponent is never really threatening to take this pawn, because let's say my opponent takes it, then what does he get? He doesn't have an f pawn anymore, so that's a weakness. That's already a weakness, and also he has an isolated e pawn there, which is another weakness. So I didn't think that was ever really a good threat or a good reason to do this, and I always thought that I would be okay if he took. So I took myself. I took myself. Looking back on it now, I don't know why I took. Apparently it's the best move. Maybe I'm so cool that I didn't really realize why I did it, but I took. Maybe I was worried about taking. It was a while ago that I did play this game. It was a couple hours ago. I guess fe5, and I guess this queen trade is kind of unpleasant. Yeah, I guess this queen trade is kind of unpleasant. Oh, actually, queen e7, and I have an almost lost position. Huh. Man, I'm smart. Whatever. Yeah, so I took, which is technically the best move. Now he has the decision to make whether he takes with the queen or takes with the rook. If he takes with the queen, there's no more pin on my queen anymore. There wasn't a pin normally, but I still don't want to trade queens right now, so I guess that's reasonable. And if he takes the rook, I don't think the rook is doing very much over there. It's not really targeting. It's not going to go to h6 ever. It's not really going to attack me because I don't have any hooks here, and I have enough defenders. I can bring my queen to defend, my knight is defending, and I can always push a pawn if I really need to. So I'm okay. And I'm always also, one other little slight detail, I'm always looking for the move g3. Always looking for the move g3 because I want to kick this knight out. After the move g3, knight h3 is kind of forced, and after king g2, I thought that maybe it'll work, but then he has this pin on my knight, so I have to always be a little bit careful about hanging the d4 pawn with my IQP structure. So my opponent took with a queen, and I go for this move knight e4, which is reasonable. It's reasonable in my opinion. Brings the knight out, it targets the queen, it allows the knight to get to the c5 square and target the bishop and this pawn. So I thought this was a pretty good move overall. Computer doesn't like it because obviously it's the second best move. The best move is actually this. I guess this pin is uncomfortable, but I really couldn't tell you why. But Oh, I just did actually. Whatever. Yeah. So I guess the pin is uncomfortable. I really don't really believe that to be honest, but whatever. I thought the knight was better here, and my opponent goes here, which is a big mistake. A big mistake, and I win the game here. I could absolutely win the game here, but I'm not focused on the right thing. I'm not focused on the right thing. Knight c5 easily wins. Knight c5 easily wins. Because let me go down the line. Knight c5. My opponent actually, the best move is to sacrifice the bishop. If the bishop moves back, for example, I get g3, knight check, knight check, king g2, knight back to g4, g5, knight g5, queen g5, and this position is actually almost lost because of this pin on the knight and the rook, and it's very, very poor for my opponent here. It's kind of hard to really do anything. I mean, you go like here, I take the knight. Let's see, he can't actually defend it. It's actually impossible to defend the knight. So he just lose here. You just lose. I did see that whole line, but it's a pretty long line. Instead I go rook e1, which I also thought was reasonable. I'm also not really thinking about knight c5. I'm more thinking about an attack on the king with knight g5 in some lines, because I see this pawn, I see all my pieces kind of pointing towards there. I got 1, 2, 3 pieces pointing towards the king. I can bring my rook over, and I thought this was just, I have an attack here, right? So I go rook e1, which is reasonable. The idea is obvious. I want to put pressure on this pawn, to pressure on the queen. I see a file. I see a queen behind the file. I put my rook on the file, obviously. And now my opponent plays the move rook a8. And this is kind of getting dicey. It's kind of getting dicey here. It's pretty dangerous. I have to be very careful. And I'm not actually. I actually pretty much lose the game here, but g3 loses the game. It's really hard to find a move for white. I play bishop b3. I mean, there's lots of options. My opponent can take on d4, for example, and after knight takes, he's gonna have this move at the no. I'm sorry, no. He would have to play king h8 first, and then he'll play e5. But yeah, this pin is very, very, very uncomfortable, and I just don't want to deal with it ever. So I have to be just very careful about that. So instead of going for something like that, I played g3, which loses to another pin. After knight h3, king g2, my opponent blunders it, but this move, knight d4, actually kind of wins the game. Because you might say, oh, well, I would take, but you're wrong, because actually my opponent gets this move, knight f2, putting pressure on this knight. Keeping everything together, and this pin towards my king is lethal. There's 2 pins. I have a pin on this knight and a pin on this knight. They're both kind of stretched out. It's very, very complicated, but I'm just losing. I'm also he's attacking my queen at the same time, so I'd have to move it, but it's very, very painful. So I have to be careful, and I'm not. So what happens here? My opponent plays e5, which is a mistake pretty obviously because of king h3. Which isn't the best move. The best move is d5 first. It's not even an intermezzo because the knight actually can't get out. The knight is trapped, which is very funny. Knight is trapped, so no matter what he does, he's not going to be able to save his knight, and I'm going to be able to win in the future. This knight isn't actually under attack because of the pin. Yeah, it's a very interesting move. I didn't play it. I just took the knight, and I took the plunge. I didn't calculate anything here because there's too much to calculate. I have a 1-minute time advantage, and I want to keep on to it for the end game so I don't lose, obviously. And it's just, there's so much to calculate here. I can't really just look through every single line to find the answer right now. So I just used my intuition and said, okay, if I can't take the knight, what the hell? Ad block? Get off my screen. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Oh, ad blocks. Silly. I'm leaving that in. Yeah. So what I was saying, king h3, if this doesn't work, then I lose, right? That's what I tell myself sometimes. If this doesn't work, then I lose. So I would have to go into it and try to see how my opponent can argue. My opponent takes, obviously. This is kind of their whole idea. They're putting pressure on these knights. But the knights aren't actually that pressured, and I just recapture, rook takes. And I think his idea was that this knight was like unprotected or something, but it's protected. There's two pieces defending it. And this is kind of disappointing for my 1900 opponent, but still, it's not the end of the world. I go queen e2, which I think is the best move. There's also other moves like queen h5, but queen e2 is actually the top engine move, despite what it shows you with the excellent bar, because the engine that game reviews this is not as strong as the engine that analyzes this. So queen e2 is the best move. My opponent plays this move, rook f4, and I realize that I'm winning again. I must be winning because I'm able to move my knight and attack the rook. Very simple, right? But first, before I do that, I decide to get my king out of danger. I play king g2. Very nice move. Very nice little intermezzo move. Because the only reason his attack would be able to work is if there was a weak king in the first place. And because this pawn is now even more defended than it otherwise would be, I should be completely much better. Now, b4. I go king g1. Another nice move. The idea is now I'm completely safe. My king is completely safe. And now there's no pin on my knight, so I'm threatening this move. That I told you about earlier. I'm threatening knight c5. Also technically threatening knight, if I can draw arrows, knight d6. But I think knight c5 is just a much nicer looking move because if the queen takes, I can take with tempo on the queen here. And even though knight d6 is technically a fork, after here something like queen takes and bishop takes rook, I don't really have another tempo move, and he has anything that he can do. He can do whatever he wants. So that's why after this move, I of course played the move. I seriously didn't play knight c5 here. Hell is wrong with me? What the hell is wrong with me? I didn't play knight c5 here. What? Boo! I played AB. The second. What am I doing? What am I doing? Oh my gosh. So bad at chess. Such an idiot. Of course knight c5 is winning. Why did I play AB? Whatever. My opponent plays h4. Continue with their attack. And now I play knight c5. Whatever, man. Whatever. Here I thought that he could actually make out. Not make out with me, like make it out of the position, like with this move bishop f3. I thought this worked because then after I can't take the queen because he would take my queen, and after takes I don't really have that much of an advantage. Of course, I actually am losing because my opponent has a rook and a queen for 2 rooks and a bishop, so that would actually be a worse position for me. I'm able to win some pawns, but the most I could get out of it is a draw. I thought bishop f3 worked. My opponent clearly didn't, so he played rook df4, another interesting move, just trying to survive, really. And the best, technically, this move doesn't, oh, it does lose. Oh my gosh. There's a draw here. Well, I'm glad I didn't play that. Yeah, pawn f5 is not a move that pawn f4 is not a move that you're ever really gonna play. I certainly wouldn't play it. Like, it just opens your king up like terribly, and I wouldn't really want to get into that. Also, I do want to show this draw. Actually, I do want to show this draw. This draw is actually very interesting. Rook g5. Let's say takes. Actually, if takes, I lose. If takes, I actually lose. Let me show you. If takes, this is mate. This is just a simple checkmate. So I have to be very careful. I can't take. And then king f1. And my opponent has just a perpetual with bishop g2 and just certain discovered checks. Technically, he can take my queen, but then I actually win because I just have a lot of material here. A lot of material for the queen. I actually have 2 pieces and a rook, which is overwhelming, and I would be completely winning. Not to mention that after this move, it's just bad. I mean, this is kind of painful. The rook is trapped. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. Rook here. Yeah, but I'm gonna win this pawn, and yeah, this position is over. But it's very hard. It's very hard to see all this. That's a very interesting little mate, but I didn't play that. I played bishop takes because I'm smart and I know what I'm doing. And my opponent kind of goes crazy with bishop f3 because they don't really have anything else. And I just take here, and my opponent simply resigns the game because there is nothing that can be done. I'm just simply winning, and it's over. It's GG. Yeah, so that was a very nice little tactical battle there. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining and instructive. Yeah, good evening and good night.